Now, this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast online, that is, only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial platforms. And this is the first part, part A, of today, Tuesday, the 4th of May 2021. One day left in Tower Hamlets in London and in Newham in London, East London, before the eligible voters are able to vote at the referendum being held in each of these two boroughs over the future structure of the local council, Tower Hamlets Council and Newham Council. Both of them have been lumbered with the corrupting, undemocratic, unaccountable, criminal cabal fronted by an elected mayor in place. The elected mayor is not accountable to either the voters or independently, objectively. And as the continuing, festering corruption, sleaze, lying, criminality surrounding Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Matthew Hancock illustrate, there is no standard of ethics or morality in practice at the central government and in Parliament. Parliament is completely toothless, and it has been completely kind of killed off politically by Keir Starmer, who is supposed to be the opposition leader in Parliament. Starmer has so miserably failed to provide any democratic semblance of demand for accountability on the cabal that is in place in power. That even Private Lie, the one that demonized Jeremy Corbyn throughout Corbyn's years, 5 years as, quote, leader of the Labour Party. Even Private Lie is kind of mocking Starmer. And there are the editorials coming from the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch scum, and the editorial line being followed by Beaver Brooks' poisonous legacy of the Daily Suppress and the scum and the Suppress and the Daily Mail. They're all mocking Keir Starmer. It is not possible to predict exactly what the outcome would be of the half of the elections or elections to the half of the councils due on Thursday. And there is the debate about whether Starmer-fronted Labour Party would be able to recover from the loss that Jeremy Corbyn caused to be sustained at the expense of the electors in the northern boroughs, the northern constituencies of England, and the 2019 so-called election that, as I said, Corbyn gave away to Johnson. So the Labour Party has been ill-served. The Labour Party, no matter how fragile the Labour Party's connection with the founding aims and objects and purpose of the Labour Party, it has seen times when it has been alive, at least, despite the fact that it has got policies that have not been consistent with the aims and purpose, but it has been alive. It has been featuring or featured in the news commentary and news lineups. Now it is absent. That is why We exclusively describe this as political murder of the Labour Party by Keir Starmer. So there is a piece on the deep inside, page 16 of the Times, about Johnson and Modi to meet by video after £1 billion trade package is sealed. Now, there is no reference to the raging virus that is ravaging so much of the demography in India. And the current, latest online reports about the virus illustrate how Modi has caused this. Because the main complaints are of shortages of hospital beds, space, staff, and of oxygen. All of these could have been kind of kept available if Modi hadn't wasted the billions pounds of worth of expenditure of public money and resources on projects promoting his ego. And that is the missing truth. The Fleet Street papers are not telling, except the Weekend Financial Times, grudging kind of running the piece from somebody, a professional writer. That is to say, he's not a professional campaigner. He's not a committed campaigner for justice and rights. He has written a number of books about India, including about M.K. Gandhi. But he's not critical of Modi's policies or of the policies of the previous regime that preceded him, Modi. And he most certainly has not covered the culture of wanton negligence that dominates the Indian central and local governments in the main. So the Fleet Street is actually silent about the causes of the large scale of the infections and the deaths, large numbers of deaths in India today. And the Indian so-called media is being twisted to promote the image of Modi as being the inspiration behind many of the responses by the hospitals and places for treatment, but people are dying on the streets of India. And there is no sign that this will abate, that this will stop. And the Indian papers and the Indian media are publishing restricted evidence, restricted numbers of deaths and infected, which is partly due to the policy imposed by Modi to tell lies about the numbers actually infected and dying and being allowed to die because of lack of medicine, oxygen, hospital bed, and so on. Now, going back to India, we shall do that in a short while, but this one has got, the Financial Times has got an editorial promoting the English judiciary, which is the same thing, promoting it, meaning that it's lying about the judiciary, which makes the Financial Times fit to be condemned as the financial crimes, because it doesn't tell the truth about the machinations of finance, the big business, the corporations, and the robbery of billions and billions of pounds by the big business conglomerates and gangs of criminals. So the Financial Times is lying about the British judiciary. Its heading is, "The judiciary is not the UK government's enemy. Curtailing judicial review weakens a vital check on executive power." That is an absolute lie. For a start, the judicial review is a notional slogan. It doesn't exist. Judicial review is another way of funding and enriching licensed law traders. Judicial review does not exist for ordinary people and does not exist for the ordinary victims of injustice. And judicial review is never, ever justifiably describable as judicial review, because it isn't. So having said that, let's have a look at the contents of these Financial Times, because what they're saying in today's Financial Times about the judiciary not being the enemy of the government is in response to the move by Johnson to curtail judicial reviews. And it says that the government, it supports the government's view. The government does have a point when it argues that large amounts of court time and money are being tied up fighting last-minute immigration claims. Notice that. It's talking about immigration claims. Nothing else, no other part of government decisions. And it admits that judicial reviews were already streamlined, that is cut, reduced in 2015. The government is also taking steps to avoid a repeat of its 2019 Supreme Court defeat through the repeal of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which could stop courts reviewing government decisions taken by royal prerogative powers traditionally retained by the monarch, such as suspending Parliament on the Prime Minister's advice. The government that is fronted by Boris Johnson today has a big majority and was elected on a manifesto that included constitutional reform to address questions that were prompted by or perhaps helped cause the Brexit referendum. It is entitled to make whatever legislative changes it chooses. But if it does so in a proper way, it need not fear the scrutiny of the courts. It's completely toothless, corrupt, stupid, and unconstitutional piece in the financial crimes. There is never the norm in Britain, and effectively it's the English courts, although they are called England and Wales courts, but they are actually English courts. And the English courts have never been rigorous in scrutinizing government, despite the fact that the two challenges over Brexit were supposedly kind of made by criticizing the government decision to prorogue the parliament or suspend parliament. They didn't actually make any difference at all. And that shows that the brainwashing of the masses continues. And this is a stupid editorial. And if it is the Financial Crimes which has run this stupid editorial, then the rest of the Fleet Street Papers' attitude towards this latest bid to scrap, in effect, scrap even the pretense of judicial review, will be even more toothless and corrupt. And it says, there is a news item there in the Financial Crimes on page 2. Under EU regulations, its heading is Asylum Seekers Wrongly Threatened with Removal. A social policy correspondent. Immigration lawyers say hundreds of people seeking refugee protection in the UK have been warned they could be removed by other countries in Europe, even though Brexit took away Britain's power to make such transfers. And this is a piece on the financial crimes peddling immigration lawyers, so-called. Now there is no evidence that the licensed law traders who trade as immigration law experts are actually campaigning for rights of their so-called clients, as are contained in the various still kind of active and valid international treaties and agreements signed by the UK, upholding the rights and human rights of asylum seekers and refugees. There has been no comparable action through the English corrupt court system that can be compared with the two newsworthy challenges to the Brexit-linked illegality and unconstitutional behavior by the conservative regimes. And in India, on the financial crimes, it admits that Modi has been urged to impose full lockdown, which is what lies at the center of this current spread. Because Modi corruptly and dishonestly and callously and negligently ended the lockdown, which unleashed the spread of the infection and the crisis that India now faces, the people facing. So there are two pieces in the financial crimes about India on page 6. India struggles with relentless onslaught of third COVID wave. And the subheading is, latest surge has cut across all social divides, leaving hospitals full and supplies scarce. And the other one is, of course, under industry. I don't know why that is an industry. Modi urged to impose full lockdown. What India is showing, I mean, the Indian spread and the third wave of the COVID spread, is that so-called national states or national states like India or the regimes that are in control of the nation states' policies, such as India and the UK and the USA, they have been unfit to claim to be governing. They have been found to have been failing to govern, that is to say, deliver the basic protection to the people they call their citizens or nationals. And as we have said many times about the UK's National Health Service, which has been the target of robbery by big business and undermining by big business right from the beginning in the 1940s. The National Health Service, and we here say it's exclusive, world exclusive, has never been prepared to deliver the service, the health service that it was supposed to be there to deliver. For example, within the National Health Service bureaucracies, there are many bureaucracies. The basic direction of the health resources has not been to meet the needs of those who need the treatment and care. Think about that. The direction has been fighting over the resources, and the agents for big business and big pharma and anti-NHS ideologues and forces that don't want a national health service. The main agents within the NHS have been the already overpaid and overly empowered consultants in the bureaucracies inside the NHS establishments have been allowed right from the beginning a bigger say than any other group in the personnel, in the man and woman power. And the other staff, like ordinary doctors, not consultants, ordinary doctors, junior doctors, and nursing and ancillary staff have not got even a fraction of the power and the influence that the consultants have been given and allowed. Now there lies the failures of the Labour Party. It doesn't have to be in power in order to make the impact about all of this. And the Labour Party has not had a national health service program that changes that and establishes the NHS that was supposedly launched in the 1940s. So, among all the other defects that have come out and come to light during the rate and the level and the quality of response to the COVID pandemic in the last, let's say, 13 months or so, the NHS has never been found ready and available to treat those who need or who are in need. It has always been contentious, there have been delays, and there is widespread racism and discrimination. Now, this is a complex kind of statement, a complex problem, because significant numbers of the NHS nursing and medical staff are from African and Asian backgrounds and other nationalities coming from outside the UK or the British indigenous white population. So how is that possible? How is the perpetuated racism possible when the staff delivering in places come from African and Asian backgrounds? Because racism, by definition, depending on the demography, is discrimination and denial of service to the people of African and Asian origins. They may be born in Britain, but originally the descendants of people from Africa and Asia. How is that possible? How does this work? How does racism work when the people in posts include significant numbers of people from the same background as the victims and targets of racism? Ethnic background, nationality background, faith backgrounds. It's possible because of the institutional nature as well as the institutional gap and the legal system being corrupt and criminal and racist. Because there is no real chain within the NHS bureaucracies whereby racism can be identified and opposed and ended, number one. Number two, main bureaucratic controls and line managements are pro-racist. That is to say, even if there is a doctor from Asian background or a nurse from African background is the subject of a complaint of discrimination made on behalf of a patient of African or Asian background, there is no actual transparent or an actual accountability process in place to establish, and there is no speedy process in place. There is no fair process in place. And outside, the court system doesn't have any facilities. In fact, this editorial in the Financial Crimes about a lot of court time being wasted by judicial reviews judicial reviews applications filed by immigration cases, law traders, gives the game away that they have got a focus on denying the already highly denied and frequently denied rights of equal access to people of African Asian origin or people of, quote, migrant identities and backgrounds in the court system. So, prima facie non-entitlement, my theory, is that if there is a name that is Asian or African, that is on the application for judicial review or a redress, seeking a redress through a tribunal, then the evidence shows that that kind of application will be treated negatively with bias and prejudice and obstruction and delay and denial. So racism is not just somebody calling names or stopping a woman in burqa in the street and assaulting them or abusing them. Racism is operated through the institutions and through the individuals, and the individuals include people from the backgrounds, same background, same kind of faith, nationality, ethnicity, that so many victims actually are from the same backgrounds as the people who are carrying out racist prejudice, racistly motivated prejudice that is part of the institution and institutional obstructions. Now, this is something that is true not just of the NHS, the health service, but it's true of the rest of the agencies and institutions where individuals are complicit in the institutional perpetration of denial, obstruction, injustice, barrier, obstacles. And this has been going on within the NHS for as long as or since the NHS was launched. And as I said, in addition to the fact that the NHS has never been free to be established as a fully equipped organization to deliver healthcare at the point of need. This discrimination and lack of redress through the judicial or quasi-judicial stages and processes make the racism absolutely brazen and unbearable. And it violates all the existing duties that the UK as a state owes to everyone under the treaties, conventions, agreements, charters that the UK remains signed up to even now, after the reduction in the numbers of those directly linked with Brexit. Because Brexit is about the European Union, not about the rest of the world in terms of the legal obligations. So those parts of the treaties and agreements and arrangements and conventions that do not apply to the European Union are still intact. But they are not being referred to even by the financial crimes. Their editorial doesn't mention any of those treaties, any of the obligations, nor do the lawyers. Although the lawyers suggest that breach is happening, they don't make a big issue of it. The law traders, that is. So, again, according to today's kind of contents of the Financial Times and the context of the contents, that is to say, Boris Johnson's latest brazen violation of the law and the constitutional obligations, the UK, on the facts, on the evidence, is unfit for purpose as a state, as agencies, and as the absence of democracy and democratic opposition actually shows. Now, we go back to applying by extrapolation the aspect of the analysis that I have just spoken about UK, if we apply by extrapolation the same findings and replace the discrimination in terms of race to anti-Muslim and anti-Dalit, anti-the poor discrimination, then it fits the situation in India, and we can say that India is an unfit state. Now that is a big criticism that can be leveled at the party that is in place, has been in place, by claiming to be patriotic and claiming to be dedicated to serving the Hindu majority. Clearly. But it is letting the Hindu majority go without any care and service and treatment and die in their thousands. So against that background, the item in the Times, which go back to the Times on page on page 16 of the Times, it says Johnson and Modi to meet by video after 1 billion trade package sealed. There is nothing in any headline about what the Financial Times is running 2-page pieces on the resurgent raging virus. Now this is the Times that is peddling Modi and Johnson business, £1 billion business. But they will not work, because Johnson is brazenly doing the very things that he said he was opposed to. That is to say, impose restrictions in order to save people from infections and deaths. That is what he has been alleged to have said at the beginning of last year, when he said that he swore, he used obscene words, and he said that he didn't care. And he said that in support of not wanting to impose lockdown. That is what he said, and this is what he has been doing. All of the propaganda in the weekend and yesterday has been about promoting the idea that there will be no restrictions, social distancing will be removed, and things will be treated as if there was no virus, there was no pandemic. This is completely exactly what Modi did. The Times is not acknowledging this, although it has published contradictory statements in the wake of the revelation that Johnson swore and said he didn't care. And he was quite happy for thousands of people dying. There has been a denial, but there has been more evidence, contextual and corroborated and authenticated by witnesses, for example, as cited by the television reporter Preston. Preston has said that he has spoken to, or he had been aware of 2 ear witnesses. Now that phrase is a new one, novel one. Ear witnesses refer specifically to audio recording that exists of Johnson making the remark that he has been denying. He did make the remark, he swore, and he denied swearing, but also the main substance, which is that he said that he didn't care if thousands of people died. Now, this is what Modi has done in India. He removed the lockdown too soon, and he went into a denial mode. And he misled the whole country in claiming that things were okay and the country could end the lockdown. And he did. and it never ended. The virus, the infection, the pandemic never ended, and it has come to a point where it is now relentless onslaught of third COVID wave. This is relentless onslaught of the third COVID wave. That is what the Financial Times is publishing. And what is happening there is that there are several sections in the item, and it's written 1, 2, 3 names there. 1 is 2, Benjamin Parkin and Josna Singh in New Delhi and Andrea Rodriguez in Mumbai. So there are 3 of them. Then there is an additional reporter in London called Harry Dempsey. And they've got an editorial, we shall come to the editorial in the Financial Crimes about India. So the latest surge has cut across all social divides, leaving hospitals full and supplies scarce. So there are 4 people's case stories that are Financial Crimes continues. One is that Aparna Haque, doctor in Mumbai, and Vishwanath Chaudhary, chief cremator in Varanasi, and Ram Bilash Gupta, migrant worker in Uttar Pradesh, and Shurindra Bhattacharya, university professor in Delhi. And Vishwanath Chaudhary is quoted. Vishwanath Chaudhary, the cremator, is quoted as saying, last year was nothing like this time. The situation is horrific. And Aparna Haque, the doctor in Mumbai, is quoted as saying, India doesn't have to be like this. That's why it hurts that much more. Now, what she is saying is what I have been saying, that the preparation to deal with that kind of crisis was not in place, but could have been put in place. That's what she is meaning. So let's read the bit that she has been quoted as saying, or she has been reported, paraphrased as saying, during the first wave last year, that is 2020, Aparna Haque's ward, that is hospital ward, at the government-run Kama Hospital for Women and Children, had about 60 patients at a time. As India's second wave surged, the number of patients shot up to 100. She said the strain on hospitals had exposed a lack of preparation. Remember what I said? Preparation. I've said about this NHS before I read this one. The concept of preparation. They exposed a lack of preparation and chronic neglect of public health care. India spends only about 1% of the GDP on the sector, 1%. So 99% goes to something else, all the other things. So the lives of Indians is only worth 1% of the attention given by Modi. Think about that. When he puts on this bogus wig and comes across as a kind of saint to the devout Hindus, brainwashing with Hindus, Modi is lying, faking, and disguising the fact. So we don't learn from our mistakes, she said. The first wave ended, and we didn't think a second wave could come. Circumstances are so dire that Haque was made unable to secure a hospital bed and oxygen for a younger colleague in time to save him. That young man should not have died, she said. Haque said the strain was affecting other spheres of public health, with potentially long-term consequences. Child immunization campaigns had been derailed and pregnant mothers were struggling to receive treatment, she added. India doesn't have to be like this. That's the thing that is heartbreaking, she said. That's why it hurts that much more. Well, she's being modest and she's being very kind to Modi, or at least she's being portrayed in this piece by the Financial Times as being kind to Modi because she's not personally naming Modi or his regime. And a stadium has become a care facility for COVID patients in New Delhi, where hospitals are full. And they've got a picture of a man called Ram Vilas Gupta, who is a migrant worker from in Uttar Pradesh. Now, those who don't know India have to understand that it's a geographically, physically huge place. And there are serious disparities between regions, quite apart from the fact that within the regions that are relatively better off, there are disparities among people, between sections of the population. And the culture that dominates the people who make the decisions and who occupy the positions of power in making decisions is not kind of compatible with the claims that it is an India that is not occupied by empire and imperialists. The thing in the Financial Times line here, latest surge has cut across all social divides. Now, all social divides is a reference to India that is not behaving like an independent free country, free for its citizens, regardless of any social backgrounds. So India remains divided based on the minority making decisions affecting the majority. To use a phrase in converted form used by Jeremy Corbyn, the few versus the many. And in India, the many are being denied and deprived and being murdered. Because what Modi has done by lifting the lockdown and not preparing the various parts of the what should have been the health service, he's letting people die, and he knows, and he knew, and he has known that would be the consequence. So he's causing massacres of Hindu Indians because he claims to be their leader and is murdering hundreds of thousands of Indian Hindus. The Financial Times is not saying that. We are saying that based on the complete evidence that we have access to. But the fact is that there is a distinction between the role of the Financial Times and the Times, because at least the Financial Times is running these two stories today. Well, this is a picture of part of the outside of the stadium that has been converted, turned into a hospital. And the picture of this man, Vilas Gupta, Ram Vilas Gupta the unemployed, jobless Ram Vilas Gupta from Uttar Pradesh, is credited to Getty, which means there is a lot of work in terms of coverage, images, videos, and text being done by Western-based mainstream media, or Western-controlled mainstream media. And Getty is the one that has almost worldwide monopoly in terms of images. This photograph may not have been taken originally by a Western person, but the Getty controls the marketing and the trading and the copyrights, so on, because it hires or pays local stringers. Now, The chief cremator in Varanasi. Varanasi is a place that is very dear to the Hindus. So therefore, they've got a correct location there with that piece from Varanasi. And chief cremator in Varanasi, the ancient city of Varanasi, on the banks of the sacred Ganges river, is where many Hindus wish to be cremated, which they believe allows their souls to complete their journey to heaven and be released from the cycle of birth and death. But the flow of bodies to Hindu crematoriums, as well as Muslims or Christian cemeteries, is relentless. Bishwanath Chaudhary, 39 years old, is the Raja or king of the Dome caste, which has for generations worked at cremation grounds in Varanasi, with up to 100 bodies now arriving daily, compared with as few as 15 last year. The searing heat and leaping flames have become unbearable. Our family has been traditionally involved in managing the crematoriums for generations. No one has ever seen anything like this, Chaudhary said. Last year was nothing like what we are witnessing this time. Just as Aparna Haque in Bombay, the doctor in Bombay, said. The situation is horrific, he added. At such times, humanity is often lost. He couldn't have put it more accurately. So dire is the onslaught that it has created shortages of wood for the pyres, with vendors pushing up prices. And then it goes to Ram Vilas Gupta, the migrant worker in Uttar Pradesh. And it describes his background. More than 15 years ago, Ram Vilas Gupta left his family and village in India's vast hinterland for the metropolis of Mumbai. He left Uttar Pradesh, which is far away from Mumbai, where he drove a taxi and shared a room with 4 other people. Like millions of migrants, the 45-year-old had to go back home last year after the country entered the nationwide lockdown and his savings ran out. When cases fell sharply at the end of last year, he returned to Mumbai and was soon earning his pre-COVID monthly income of up to rupees 18,000, that is equivalent to $243. But by late March, with Mumbai hard hit by a second COVID-19 wave, his taxi earnings dried up. Now back in his village and jobless again, Gupta does not know how he will repay the rupees 40,000 of debt he took out during last year's crisis. He is afraid the virus, which is tearing through rural India, will arrive in his village, where many still doubt it even exists. That's why I came to the village, because of corona. Some people say there is no corona, but I am very afraid. So in addition to the fact that the people who do admit the existence of the virus and are dying and are being affected, there is this additional problem of disbelief in the villages across India. Now that shows that most of these people who believe that there is no pandemic are not being reached by Modi's government. And Uttar Pradesh is hinterland, and it's a big place, and it has got very ardent anti-Muslim Hindus living there. I mean, Uttar Pradesh is one of the places where basic human rights are denied to Muslims and the other people of lower caste. And now these people, the Uttar Pradesh Hindu majority, are now going to face the very pandemic they deny the existence of. And they're not going to survive because they don't even have the information that it is ravaging the rest of the country already. So the basic fact is not reached them. How can basic treatment and life-saving help can be delivered to them? It will be too late and too unrealistic to expect such service to be provided by Modi government. Now, this Sourindra Bhattacharya, university professor in Delhi. This Sourindra Bhattacharya sounds like a Bengali name from West Bengal, but I could be making a guess. Like so many others in recent weeks, 57-year-old Sourindra Bhattacharya, or Bhattacharji as is written, tried and failed to find a hospital bed for a loved one. India's middle and upper classes typically enjoy access to world-class health. World-class healthcare in India. He doesn't say that, but that's what it is meaning. While the poor depend on underfunded government hospitals. But now, even those who can afford it are struggling to secure treatment. They're talking about Sourindra Bhattacharya. After the blood oxygen levels of Bhattacharya's diabetic elder sister, Gauri, dropped below 80%, a healthy reading is above 90%. The business professor was advised to have her admitted to hospital. But with beds in hospitals in Delhi full, his attempts failed. At one emergency room, he was turned away by a doctor who pointed to a young man with oxygen levels as low as 13%. I realized there was no point trying, Bhattacharya said. I brought her home. He found an oxygen cylinder for his sister, but he did not have the equipment needed to hook her onto it. His sister is still at home with him while he tries to ensure she recovers and not become infected himself. She seems to be on the mend, said Bhattacharya. God has been kind to me. Now, these are some of the stories that the Financial Times has published. Now, there is this opinion. Financial Times has got two opinion pieces. One we have discussed partly, the judiciary, the backing for the judiciary and the government. Toothless piece. Now, what is the opinion piece reference about? So the opinion piece not the editorial, that was a misreference. The opinion piece on the opposite page, page 23, and it's written by what looks like an Indian writer, the Morgan Stanley Investment Management Chief Global Strategist. He is author of the 10 Rules of Successful Nations. This is somebody called Ruchir Sharma. Sharma is an Indian name. Ruchir, I have to check. Over the past month, even as the pandemic raged, nearly 150 million Indians voted in 5 state elections. Now, this is going to be about Modi. The ruling Bharatiya Janata Party wanted to draw out the voting in multiple phases so that Prime Minister Narendra Modi could appear as widely as possible. He made more than 24 personal appearances. In the key battleground of West Bengal alone, rarely has a party tried harder to take over a single state's government. The BJP mobilized its vast political machine with a lavishly funded army of cadres, yet when the final tally was announced on Sunday, it had failed to dislodge West Bengal's Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. In her later phases of balloting, no, in the later phases of balloting, not her, in the later phases of balloting, the BJP lost momentum as the virus spiraled out of control, showing Modi's government was way behind the curve. Over the past 6 weeks, India has suffered one of the biggest surges of COVID-19 any country has seen, with cases rising by around 12-fold, according to official figures. The real numbers are probably many times worse. A crisis of this magnitude would stress even the world's best healthcare system. In India, it has exposed a pre-existing frailty, a broken state. What I said before, I even read this one. Modi is fronting a broken state and has been fronting a broken state. And he has been lying to the very people whose votes he has cultivated. Now, this one goes on to say, a few developed countries such as France and Italy also suffered rapid case surges during their later waves of the pandemic. Even so, they managed to lower death rates from the first wave as their health system had readied for the shock. In India, by contrast, the second wave has brought with it scenes of devastation reminiscent of the Dark Ages. He's not even talking about what they refer to usually to 1947 and the so-called partition. They don't say it was the independence from the British colonial regime and rule. They call it partition, thus shifting the whole focus away from the British occupation of 190 years. A few developed countries such as France and Italy also suffered rapid cases, but they recovered. When I watch video clips, I meaning Ruchir Sharma, of overwhelmed hospitals blocking their gates and leaving desperate patients to die, I am haunted by the thoughts of my grandfather. He died of a heart attack under similar circumstances, turned away from a public hospital where there was no doctor on night duty, and an orderly tried but failed to install a pacemaker. But that was in 1993. India's underlying tragedy is how little progress has been made since 1993. So 1993 is what? 28 years. 28 years ago. 3 decades. Among the world's 25 biggest emerging markets, India ranks last for the number of hospital beds per 1,000 citizens, fifth from the last for doctors, and fourth last for nurses and midwives. Even if you drop richer emerging markets and compare India to other large countries with average per capita income of between $1,000 and $5,000, which includes Pakistan and Bangladesh, India still looks mediocre on these basic healthcare measures. Government spending generally rises as a share of the economy, as countries grow richer. Indeed, India spends about as much as a typical nation in its income class, about 30% of gross domestic product. So the problem is not the size of India's state, but how it spends. When Modi came to power in 2014, he mocked the welfare populism of his predecessors, yet within a few years, he was buying with them in his promises of generous freebies, from gas to food or houses. Today, welfare spending accounts for 9% of the GDP, far higher than the miracle economies India would like to emulate, like South Korea and Taiwan, when they were at similar levels of development. Modi has meanwhile done little to modernize India's state, which in many ways still operates in ways that hark back to British rule. That's the first reference to the British Empire. The model for many state agencies dates to the late 1800s, the healthcare system to the 1940s. In past elections, I have traveled thousands of miles on India's back roads and seen too many understaffed public health clinics, operating rooms without surgeons, X-ray machines without radiologists. To be surprised, they have now faltered. Modi promised maximum governance. Modi promised maximum governance, not government. But rather than reform India's outdated state, he has centralized power like no other leader in India's democratic history. He set himself up as the nation's savior who would solve its every problem. But even a Formula One driver cannot make such progress in an ambassador. The old Indian-made jalopy. The reality is that BJP can no longer claim to offer a superior model of governance. This shortcoming is now starting to show in the polls. The good news is that private groups, as so often, have rushed in during this pandemic to provide what the government does not. Expatriates are sending money and medical resources from abroad. Residential associations provide whatever they can to ailing neighbors. So far, the Indian stock market has barely flinched over the rising death toll. This is probably due to a collective intuition that India will survive this crisis too. But that will not be thanks to its leader or the broken state. Now, that is an Indian writing about India, lumbered with Modi and his murderous policies and failures. This is only a matter of time before Modi is ousted. I mean, Modi is effectively irrelevant now already, and he will be more irrelevant by the minute. But this piece is again new for Fleet Street. I mean, this is much more focused than the Guha piece at the Weekend Financial Times. But still, it is ending with the propaganda for the private businesses and private initiatives. So we are doing the tweet. We're tweeting these two pieces on the Financial Times. Well, three pieces. And this one from the news pages. This one is the one that is headed, India struggles with relentless onslaught of third COVID wave. So we posted these tweets containing the news pieces in the Financial Times today, 4th of May 2021. And we have referred to or tweeted to the South India film actress Pranita Subhash, who is now trying to do films based in Mumbai, according to latest reports. And the reason why we have tweeted to her, Pranita Subhash, is because she tweeted a reference to violence in West Bengal and has expressed the opinion that she hoped strong measures would be taken against the perpetrators. Now, that is directly the line of the BJP, and she is a BJP activist, which she has got the objective international rights to be, but she has to have the willingness to recognize the facts, and the facts and the evidence in India today, and especially this opinion by Mr. Sharma in the Financial Times today, do not support the line that she is taking. Whether she is making those comments all by herself or as part of the programmed propaganda orchestrated by the BJP High Command makes no difference, because the evidence has to be recognized. And so far, she hasn't posted anything that shows anywhere near a willingness to recognize the facts of what is happening. And she doesn't refer to the very serious onslaught of the third COVID in India, and she doesn't refer to the affected people, let alone to the people who are dying, let alone to the desperate position of cremation crisis. So we will come back to the comparison between Modi and Boris Johnson in more regards than may appear to be the case. But we talk a bit about the Daily Mirror, why it is overly promoting the holiday prospect of Britons going to European countries. Now that is the front page of the Daily Mirror today. And it's a pun on the EU post-Brexit. This is again something that may turn out to be premature, because although the propaganda initiative by Johnson is showing that the virus is on the kind of retreat, there is no evidence that it is on the retreat, because scientists are still not convinced that Johnson is right to declare that the vaccine has gone. And this is obscene. This is a picture of, why is this picture there? And why is this person appearing without any clothes, where clothes should be? This is not something that has got any positive contribution to their culture. It is something else. And they're celebrating this Boris Johnson propaganda there. And there is a piece in the opinion piece by the Mirror where it says, pay up, Boris. What is he referring to? Boris Johnson cannot legitimately claim to lead the country when a majority of the public believe nurses deserve a pay rise higher than his measly 1% offer after a year risking their lives fighting COVID. Now, that's the usual line that the Daily Mirror has, but it hasn't got anything remotely like what the analysis that we have been presenting shows. That the NHS is deliberately allowed to fester in confusion, lack of preparation, and the rest. This singular obsession by the so-called left and the Labour Party with the low wages for nurses misses the rest of the story, rest of the picture. While that is correct, and the nurses should be paid properly, the plethora of problems that afflict and plague the NHS must be recognized, admitted, and dealt with. But the Mirror doesn't do that. The Labour Party doesn't do that. Now, there are two pieces in the Daily Mirror that are about crime and criminality. One is that they're saying that, well, they're showing this large group of police searching the area where the police community support officer was murdered. And the other, they're saying about the football violence in Manchester. Let's read this one. Read this one directly from the paper. It says, hunt the thugs among the fans. Manchester United vow to ban the yobs. 6 cops hurt in violent clash. That's the Daily Mirror about the violence in Manchester. There are two things to be said about the murder of the police community support worker in South London and this thugs violence in Manchester. The fact that a large number of police have been available to search the area looking for clues and evidence linked to the murder of the police community support officer shows that the police can find the personnel if they want to. Now, for example, that scene that has been now linked with other crimes, suspected crimes and murders and violence, was not policed. And all of England is not policed now. You don't see police on the streets. Now the question is, who abolished the police? Because that is equivalent to the police being abolished. Who removed the police from the streets of England? This question needs to be answered by Parliament, by government, by the media. And Fleet Street has got no clue. It has these kind of stupid pieces like hunt the thugs among the fans and then peddles the Manchester United club, allegedly vowing to deal with the thugs and yobs. But it doesn't have any connection between the yobs doing the thuggery and the murderer or murderers doing the murders and crimes in the case of South London. In London, where there are anything between 8 and 9+ million people, it's a lot of people. You don't see police on the streets. And the fact that the disappearance of the police from the streets over the last, 15, 20 years has coincided with the increase in the incidents of murders of young people by young people is not coincidental. It is connected. Because not only are the criminals and the thugs aware that there won't be any deterrence appearing around the corner, there won't be any policeman or woman or police personnel appearing around the corner, that they will never be seen doing the things. And it's always long after, too late, after the crimes have been committed. Because there is this consolidated belief that the police are not going to see the crimes being committed. So the criminals can do the various stages of their crimes in the knowledge, confident in the knowledge that there won't be any police witnessing, let alone stopping them doing the crimes. And Fleet Street is stupidly run. When they report about the crimes, they don't talk about the absence of police from the streets. And they don't go into the reason for it. They don't ask the question as to why. They don't say who decided to remove the police from the streets. It's like a darkness. It's a darkness like the agreement to maintain this dark denial exists. In effect, it's the unwritten agreement among editors and publishers and journalists. And members of parliament come to that. When was the last time that any of the Fleet Street papers or media, including the BBC, Sky News, even mentioned this fact, that's this connection, this absence of police from the streets? And that is not the only problem. As yesterday's papers, the papers in the last 2 days have admitted, more than 1 million reported burglaries were declared as not worth investigating by the police. I mean, burglary is not a joke. Burglary is a major crime, affects people with devastating consequences for the rest of their lives. Victims of burglary. And burglary cannot be just dismissed as being targeted for or at property. Burglary can include violence against the people at the properties or addresses that are attacked and targeted. So what is happening is that the Fleet Street papers are full of content without substance. And they're not talking about, they're giving the facts or the alleged facts of the numbers. 1 million burglary reported, not followed up or treated as crimes. But they're not investigating why, which there should be. The real objective definition of news and journalism is that you investigate. There are 5 or 6 well-known, well-rehearsed questions that should be answered in every news. What, where, when, why, how, etc. So if there is a statistical data being released by some agency, which the Fleet Street papers are then copying mindlessly and thoughtlessly, that statistic deserves to be investigated, examined. Why, where, when, these then give the actual picture as near as possible in a news item or news coverage to the reader, to the members of the public. So the members of the public and the reader can become, to that extent, more aware of the events. That's the whole purpose of journalism, or should be, which purpose has been kind of forgotten by or abused by the Fleet Street papers. Now here he is going to the another crime. This is the one about the ITV program fronted by Jeremy Kyle. And this one is saying, that's in the Star, which has got their same Jennifer Lopez exhibition on as well. This is the one that says the shock new claims. And the shock new claims include this: bosses on the Jeremy Kyle show, that is on the ITV, that is no longer active now. It was axed in 2019. Bosses on the Jeremy Kyle show would grade programs from A to D, depending on how shocking they were. Now, those who don't know what Jeremy Kyle show was, it was a sadistic program. Most of the populist programs on television are sadistic or incitement to crime and cruelty. And there is no accountability, there is no audit for the contents or the role of these programs, because there is a so-called watchdog. I mean, that is the most inappropriate word or phrase to use about Ofcom. Ofcom is a dead organization. Just like Keir Starmer has been politically murdering the Labour Party as the democratic opposition, these agencies, as we have been saying in this country, like Ofcom, Ofwatch, Off this, Off that, these are completely off target and off the task and unfit for the purpose. Anyone who tries to watch or kind of visit the website of the or portal run in the name of Ofcom and wants to kind of interact will be defeated, because the Ofcom portal and the websites are a deliberate, intentional course of obstacles against people trying to make complaints or get information. So Ofcom is not releasing this information. This is about whistleblowers, that is to say, people who know the program or who knew the program that Jeremy Kyle hosted are now revealing, coming out with, of course, confidentially, evidence that shows that it was an intentionally sick-making, sadistic program to begin with. And it was founded on sadistic exploitation of vulnerable people invited as guests. And the next sentence says the cruel talk show was axed in 2019. It says the word cruel here, amazingly. Following the death of guest Steve Diamond. So Steve Diamond is pictured now. Let's go to the rest of the copy that is on page 7. And the rest of the story is that one. And that's the Kyle, the vile Jeremy Kyle. It's pictured. So it says show bosses had grades to raise conflict. So they intentionally created conflict on the show by exploiting the level of vulnerability of the vulnerable guests. And there is no record that Ofcom has cared at all about the well-being or safety of the exploited vulnerable guests. Now, Kyle is a vile sadist, as anyone who watched this or suffered any of his episodes would know. Jeremy Kyle show bosses graded episodes A to D for conflict, and staff allegedly feared the X if they produced a flop. Whistleblowers who used to work on the series, as I said before, deemed cruel by critics, claimed the marking created a horrible atmosphere and put them, that is the workers, under insane pressure to generate on-screen clashes. So it was sadistic, brazenly sadistic. It forced people who worked on the program to create conflict among the vulnerables and clashes. Now, a question about the Star. Why didn't any of the Fleet Street papers do this themselves? Because it was quite obvious from watching the contents of the Vile Kyle show, that cruelty was being intentionally created. So why didn't they investigate? And the Star has got an editorial, sort of editorial comment about the latest shocking disclosures. It has got this item. And it's saying that the Vile Kyle show is more grim, that is to say, is even more grim with this revelation than it was thought by them to be. Everything disclosed up to now about how the Jeremy Kyle show operated has made grim reading. But today's revelations are even more damning. Staff, that is many of whom were working in television for the first time, say they were under huge pressure to book guests who were likely to kick off, that is to say, become confrontational and have clash or be involved in clashes that were intended to be created. So they were not spontaneous. The more unstable they were, the more chance there would be fireworks. So it was deliberately created as an insane program, what is usually known as lunacy and madness. That's what they did on that program. Whistleblowers, that is to say, people who reveal information from their knowledge as employees or involved in the particular organization or episode or program that is referred to in the revelations. That is what is called whistleblowers. Claim their bosses would grade shows from A to D, with A shows being the most dramatic, that is the most violent and chaotic and cruel. Those responsible for making D bookings could end up getting the X, and the program would sack those who didn't create conflict. So the good people were being punished and the bad people, the evil ones, were being praised, promoted, and rewarded. As the lawyer representing tragic Steve Diamond's family has said, the show was a form of human bear baiting. The former staff have said the show was a ticking time bomb and that it was a miracle other guests hadn't killed themselves over the years. Steve Diamond's inquest will take place in July this year, and Jeremy Kyle will have to give evidence in person. Let's hope that he is made to squirm as much as his guests were made to squirm on his hideous show. Well, all the common sense criteria applied, if they were applied to the contents of Kyle's show, if they are applied to similar programs, cruelly produced programs on television, then many of the programs would be have to be axed on the grounds of safety, public health, and human rights, and protecting the participants who should be treated as victims from the cruelty and violence inflicted by the television program makers. Now the BBC, I have long argued that the BBC is a corrupt criminal outfit. Anyone watching this would know that I find most of these organizations to be corrupt, dishonest, as I do the occupants of political public office, based entirely on verified evidence. But I have also taken part in television programs just for evidential reasons. And one program that I took part in was aired on the BBC and fronted by the crook and the liar and criminal, racist Robert Killjoy. And the last name Silk I have re-edited with S followed by 3 asterisks, not silk but something else. Now, without going into every aspect of it, I was appearing there to comment on the role of school governors in the behavior, in the policies and the conduct of the schools. It was supposed to be on that subject of the schools and schools' role. So when I attempted to make a point, Killjoy S showed his complete dishonesty and corruption by branding my attempt as being disruptive, which wasn't. It could be disruptive if I wanted to, but I went there to make a contribution. And it wasn't disruptive. It was unique because nobody else present would have known what I was going to say or would have contributed the same comment or opinion or evidence for the good of the public and so on. Now, that was done, that was allowed to be done by Killjoy S, by the BBC. And there was nothing. There was no accountability for that misconduct by him and that abuse. And of course, after that, Killjoy sheet not necessarily linked to that particular program, but Killjoy S, like Nigel Farage, has been exposed as a complete liar, opportunist, and shoddy as hell. So these Jeremy Kyle, the vile Jeremy Kyle revelations may be shocking at the present time this week, but this is not something that is unrepresentative or exceptional to most of popular kind of television programs and shows. And there is no accountability. Why is it important? Because people, the gullibles as well as others, are influenced by the contents of what is broadcast and are brainwashed. And it has to be the first duty of broadcasters to tell only the truth and to tell the truth responsibly and by having regard to the viewers, whoever the viewers are. And that is missing. I mean, all the evidence about the role played by the BBC across the board, because BBC platform does have various outputs and contents that affect so many people in so many different kind of ways. But essentially, the BBC doesn't have anything in place for accountability, for telling the truth, for holding to account anyone who is involved in making or manufacturing any program about evidence or facts or factual programs or factuals, as they say, as has been illustrated by the latest report that the Director General in place until recently, until the new one was imposed by the crooks in the Conservative government, fronted by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. That one, Tony Hall, was himself a liar. And Tony Hall, according to a report by the Daily Mail Group, has instructed lawyers to deal with allegations about the role of the BBC management in Martin Bashir's serial lies and reported deception of Diana prior to the interview that was broadcast in 1995, fronted by Bashir and containing that interview by Diana. Because the allegations include allegations about management. And although Tony Hall wasn't the Director General in 1995, he was an executive, but he wasn't a Director General. He has taken the action in order to save his reputation. Well, that shows that there is no process of accountability. Because instead of having to go to the lawyers or a lawyer, so-called, there should have been an accountability, chain of accountability, right from the beginning, for 25 years, which shouldn't have had caused this particular kind of series of claims to be made, although they have been sourced to Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, who has come to life in a default kind of way, in a backdoor kind of way, by suddenly discovering that Martin Bashir lied to him or tricked his sister into the interview and so on. So that shows that not only is the BBC allowed to tell lies and invent lies and broadcast lies, the whole of Fleet Street is completely complicit, while most of the times the crimes are being committed. I mean, 25 years is a long time, or quarter of a century, before Charles Spencer woke up. And Charles Spencer, despite the fact that he can capitalize on the fact that he is the brother of Diana, he has not really come across in this particular series of allegations and claims against Martin Bashir as being intellectually and morally and evidentially an independent agent. He has fueled the line that Bashir was the one that actually created a series of lies intended to harm the image of the royal family. So Spencer can be seen as an agent working for the royal family. Remember, the whole burden of the claim by Muhammad Haque, whose son Dodi was murdered in the same incident where Diana was murdered, has said that the royal family had a role in the murders. So the royal family is being kind of given a belated additional structure of support, although it is quite long-winded and elaborate, and it is not a straightforward series of allegations. But it sticks with the international community observing Britain and observing the murder of Diana. The Diana was murdered. So the royal family has suffered this particular stain, and whatever the outcome of whatever steps are taken by Tony Hall or any of the other bureaucrats in the BBC of this particular set of allegations by Charles Spencer, the outcome would be to add a minor point in at least apparent exoneration of the royal family in the murder of Diana and Dodi Fayed. That is what the crime involved is, that Fleet Street is not saying anything about the benefit that Charles Spencer's intervention against Martin Bashir may have. It's not going to benefit Charles Spencer himself, because he has been making more than one claim that Bashir was kind of plotting to damage the reputation of the royal family by telling Diana that the royal family was plotting to harm her. Now, the role of Charles Spencer is significant because he's Diana's brother. Nobody else could claim the same kind of standing. But the behavior of the Fleet Street papers against Harry, because he married Meghan, brings back questions about the role and the modus operandi on the part of the royal family. That they are engaged in plots and conspiracies and in leaks. Because all the information about Meghan Markle that Fleet Street published initially could not have been obtained from somewhere else. They had to come from the royal family, whoever was or were the sources of the leaks. Why were the royal family determined to destroy Harry because he married Meghan? So this question will continue to be relevant. Now, again, the legal situation in this country. Quite apart from the vile Jeremy Kyle, the Sun today has got this item about, again, 20 years after Stuart's death, Barrymore, justice at last. I mean, they are putting that as a question mark. Now, the question is, why hasn't the Sun been investigating the death at Barrymore's house party of that innocent young person called Stuart? Police are ready to charge a suspect over Stuart Lubbock's death at Michael Barrymore's home 20 years ago. They will send a file to prosecutors after a man aged 50 was held on suspicion of murder. Stuart, 31, left, was found dead in the 68-year-old television star's pool in Essex. He was not 68, he was, 48, wasn't he, in 20 years ago, so it was in his 40s. And I've got a full story on page 5, which is, so that's the front page, and that's the page of the full story. So, and say, Stuart Lubbock's father is ill, but he has said that I've never given up my fight for justice. Terry Lubbock has relentlessly fought for his son for 20 years, even though he claimed yesterday, many have tried to silence me. Cancer-stricken Terry, 76, who may have just days to live, added, my only regret is that whatever happens, I will never have the day in court to face my son's killer. The body of Dad 2, Stuart, 31, was found in the swimming pool of Barrymore's 2 million pound Essex home in 2001. And the Sun is saying that Barrymore himself has not made any public comment since the development, that is the arrest of this man. And all the guests have refused to speak to the Sun. Now that is interesting, isn't it? This is that picture of the event in the USA for vaccine support that Harry attended. This is a rare positive item about Harry at all in any Fleet Street paper. And they're repeating the item from yesterday that Samantha Cameron is supporting Kerry Simmons. Why that is important is a mystery. But they are lining up any kind of fragile basis of support that is not immediately condemned as corrupt. Because Samantha Cameron has been the opposite of David Cameron in the profile that she has had. Now, this is something that is absolutely rare. Now, why is it rare? Because I think this piece is to do with the fact that this person of mixed race is the one that is complaining about the racism. This is not really against racism. This is a propaganda piece they're running. And she is saying that this mixed race thing is obvious. It makes me think, if I was darker, I would be sat here. Would I be sat here right now? Because I felt like it ruined a lot. It should have been the best time of my life. She's, well, it's a piece that is about from the outside, Lee Ann Pinnock's pop star life as 1/3 of Little Mix looks the absolute dream, with a string of chart-topping hits, sold-out tours, and a soccer star fiancé. But behind the scenes, it hasn't just been her former bandmate, JC Nelson, trolled for her image, who has struggled. In a new BBC One documentary, Lee Ann opens up about how racism within the music industry and the country as a whole has ruined her decade-long career in the group. Now, is that true? Is that in the Sun that says racism in the whole country as a whole? If that is the case, why doesn't the Sun, which is part of the racist hate inciters platforms, why doesn't it cover the truth every day? Because racism perpetuated every single day and has been way since before the birth of this not so black skinned black person. Because the Sun is the source. One half, let's say, Daily Mail on the other half, and the Daily Suns come the one half of the platform of racist incitement of hatred right across this country. And there is this piece in the Daily Mail which is complete rubbish, absolutely dishonest and corrupt. As we said before, the police have been abolished. Policing has been abolished when it affects the many. There are no police on the streets of Britain, and millions of cases of actual crimes are being denied as being crimes and are being shelved by the formally existing police. And in view of the election propaganda for Sadiq Khan for tomorrow, well, Thursday, day after tomorrow, Sadiq Khan has kind of expressed his confidence in the current police commissioner in London, Cressida Dick, over allegations that the Metropolitan Police are under her command assaulted and attacked the peaceful mourners that attended the vigil in memory and honor of the murder victim, murdered by a policeman, Sarah Everard. So where do the people denied proper policing and proper kind of protection and service which the police in theory should be delivering, where do they go? When the mayor of London behaves in that opportunistic and corrupt way, where do they go? And the fact that there are about 18 or 19 or 20 different so-called inquiries into whether Boris Johnson said that or not, whether Boris Johnson lied about the decoration of his flat or the estate in Downing Street. I mean, what is going on? This is complete, absolute lunacy and insanity, lack of any society accountability whatsoever, which is an absolute relevant question that we can continue to consider. And here is the issue of lack of accountability by the local councils. As we have been saying, the two local councils in East London, Tower Hamlets and Newham, electors in the two boroughs are being offered the scope or the chance of opportunity to vote against the existing corrupt mayor post. And there is a leaflet about Newham saying restore people's power. Vote for committee model. Newham referendum on the 6th of May 2021. Let's change the Newham mayor system. Well, that statement is completely misleading because it's not changing the mayor system, but getting rid, scrapping the mayor system. And as we've been saying, for the last, 19 years, Newham has been lumbered with the corrupt post of elected mayor. And for 16 of those years, the person in place in that post, this corrupt post, has been Robin Wales. And Robin Wales has been at the center of serial corruption and criminality that were perpetrated via the Newham Council. Why is that significant? Because as the locally elected council, Newham Council had the legal framework that cannot be individually challenged by an individual elector or member of the community, nor can be equated to an individual person's power or legitimacy. The sheer structural weight automatically given to the local council is too unequal. So therefore, even those who have been directly targeted by the corruption by an omnium council have not been given the say or the scope by anything that exists in the name of judiciary or judicial kind of relief. So it's like the council has been given license to rob, loot, lie to, lie about, lie against ordinary people. And although there have been elected councillors, Newham has got elected councillors, all of whom are members of the Labour Party or are alleged members of the Labour Party, because there is no other party on the elected council's list of councillors. Although they are members of the Labour Party, Newham's councillors have never behaved as elected voices for the community, representatives of the community at all. Not for those 19 years since 2002 when the first elected mayor post was occupied by Robin Wales, who has been followed by Ruxana Fiaz since May 2018. Despite the fact that there are two different individuals covering the 19 years. Their behavior, their roles, their attitude, and the roles in kind of continuously and persistently obstructing the truth, accountability, has been very similar. So when I condemned his role over the previous 16 years in my live television confrontation with Robin Wales, broadcast live on the 14th of March 2018, I accused him on live program that he had been running a dictatorial regime, making elected councillors cower, that is, bow in fear of his retributions and his kind of revenge if they spoke out. And I, in effect, accused him of lying. Wales could not cite a single thing that I was saying as evidentially untenable. And I condemned him for corruption because on the facts, on the evidence, he was claiming, in response to my initial question about his not having taken, remember at this edition at the beginning, I read the bit and discussed judicial review in examining this stupid and ignorant Financial Times editorial. I said to him that he was claiming that the housing crisis that he had kind of perpetuated during his 16 years and the lack of housing, construction, etc. He was claiming that the housing policies of Newham Council were directly affected by the Conservative Party policy in government, dating back to the days of Margaret Thatcher. Now, I will never be able to support any Conservative policy, not anything I have seen so far. So I was not speaking as any way a supporter of the Conservative government. What I was doing there was examining objectively the evidence. And objective evidence showed, and still does, that the fact that there is a government policy in operation is not an automatic stop. It does not mean that a challenge through the courts cannot be made to end or bring about an end to that kind of policy. And I was saying to Wells, in fact, I was asking him as well, why had he not taken court action against the Conservative policy? And on live program, Robin Wells said that he had tried, but that he was advised against it. So when he said that he was advised, it meant that he was advised by so-called licensed law traders. So I said, after that I said, come on, show me the advice. Who gave you the advice? And on what legal basis? Now he knew that he was stuck there. So he said he would send to the program concerned where this challenge and exchange was taking place the copy of the advice. Now that was March the 14th, April the 14th. So it was 6 weeks before the 3rd of May 2018 election, when he was no longer, after which he was no longer in place, but he was there for 6 weeks after that program. He never sent the legal advice over the 6 weeks that followed. And he never answered a single email that I had sent him. He said that he was going to give me his direct personal email address, not the one that is mayor@newham.gov.uk, but Robin Wells, his name. He never answered. And he never, of course, sent anything, let alone the legal advice. So I continued to ask questions about Robin Wells making that false promise and statement. And the administration, fronted by Roxana Fiaz, sent me more than once a denial, saying that Robin Wells was no longer there. Now, how stupid can it be? It wasn't Robin Wells's personal property or duty or power, whatever. Because my question to him was not as Robin Wells, but as the policy that he was fronting. So it was the policy in the council, Newham Council, as the mayor. And I couldn't go to the councillor because the councillor would not be able to speak for Robin Wells at all. Now that would be different if Robin Wells wasn't the mayor or there wasn't a post of mayor, because the council could then be pursued with the question and the detailed follow-ups. And that has not been possible for more than 20 years now. Well, when the campaign for foisting an elected mayor on Newham began at the turn of the century, with Tony Blair passing this 2000 legislation that also caused the creation of the post of mayor at the expense of London. So, despite the fact that I have sent the same questions to Roxana Fiaz in the last 2 years, she has not answered the questions. And she is on the record as having told me, having praised me, Roxana Fiaz, volunteered to praise me. I didn't know her personally when she approached me from behind with a string of words in praise of my role in holding the council to account. I had never communicated with her until that time. So this is another liar, this Roxana Fiaz. As bad for the community, as bad for democracy, as bad for accountability as Robin Williams ever was. So it doesn't matter. And the same thing applies in Tower Hamlets. Lutfur Rahman is on the record as being condemned widely, comprehensively as a corrupt holder of the post, the corrupt post. And his kind of follower, like, let's say, John Biggs has been a liar as well. So the corrupt post of elected mayor is unfit for democracy, for accountability, for answerability for the people in these two, quote, deprived boroughs. And the boroughs must be relieved of these criminals, criminal post holders and the criminal post. That makes it criminals. So that ordinary people, at least in theory, can approach elected individual councillors asking for accountability by the council, which currently these individual councillors can dodge and deny, and they say that they are not permitted because of the mayor system. The mayor is the one that holds all the power and can ban and does ban individual councillors from speaking out. So on Thursday, there is the only time that will ever come, because if the mayor system is not removed this Thursday, it will not be removed ever. So we say to anyone watching this, or anyone who is watching this who knows anyone in Tower Hamlets or in Newham, to strongly vote against the existing system, which is the mayor, and to vote for bringing back the system that has a leader of the group as the council leader, and members of the cabinet and the councillors can then check the behavior of the decisions, on the behavior on the decisions that the leadership does make, and the issues that are important to the voters and the electors in the community. So what we'll be doing, we'll be continuing the next part about the mayor in Tower Hamlets and the records of Lutfur Rahman and John Biggs. And we shall be doing that in updating on the campaign for justice for the 4 Bethnal Green schoolgirls betrayed by Tower Hamlets Council.